Okay, we should be good to go. Hello, chat. Let us know if you can hear us and see my cursor waving around. That would be helpful. Once we get some sort of audio-visual confirmation, we'll get going. Not that there's any shortage of things to talk about.
I checked, should work. I've got it on the second monitor.
Oh.
I'm smart this time around.
This time around. took you long enough. How old are you? Right, now that everything works, first things first. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it's Friday, but we also appreciate that the world is locked down. So maybe we're not as lucky to have your company as we may think. But thank you for being here nonetheless. Even in the absence of valid alcohol offering alternatives. Thank you to Bybit for sponsoring Technical Roundup. We couldn't do this without their support. Technically we could, but no way we have the motivation for something like that. I mean, a routine? God, no chance, right? So thank you to them. Their links can be found in the description below. It's a great way to support the channel and help us out. So thank you to Bybit, and thank you to those who follow through. Final thing, make sure to like the video if you haven't already, or maybe later on when Not So Fast says something really clever, makes us look stupid. That might warrant your attention in that form as well. And we are almost at 12k subs. If this is a real bull market, these metrics should start looking a bit like the Bitcoin chart. So any role in facilitating that would be most grateful. If this is your first time here, we stream every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 p.m. UTC, doing all sorts of things, mostly just looking at candlestick charts, because after 3 years of being in the space, our expertise has not expanded beyond that. Unlike that of our guest, and we've got Not So Fast with us, unless you've been living under some very weird rock. I'm sure you've heard of him, but thank you for joining us, mate. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Good, thank you. And the duck, of course, Don.
Hey.
How's Casual Friday treating you?
Good. All good.
You're both locked down, correct?
Oh yeah, quite locked down. This is our second lockdown, so you know, fool me twice sort of thing going on. I just find it crazy how we've had a full, almost like the world, or at least the Western world collectively, has had more or less a year to get on top of things, right? And just figure something out, be it a sort of track and trace or just something to return life to some semblance of normalcy. And at least in the UK, we failed. And even, you know, compared to our European peers, we're kind of the worst out of them. So it's really a big shame.
Oh, are you completely locked down? Like completely?
Schools are still open.
Okay.
But I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, schools, educational stuff. But yeah, anything leisurely. And supermarkets, obviously, but that's it. No bars, clubs, can't go anywhere, non-essential travel. Yeah, it's pretty rough.
My goodness. But you're still allowed to leave your house to, you know, take a walk.
Yeah,
right?
We're not in kind of South Australian police Twitter account, which says you can't take your dog for a walk.
I saw that too. That was very funny.
Duck, how's Germany faring?
So far, so good. I mean, pretty much everything's closed that is fun. And that's pretty much it, I think. Like, schools are still open. Supermarkets still open. I think shops are even open still, like normal ones. But yeah, anything you have fun doing isn't. So
that's unfortunate. Yeah. We might be just here in this part of Canada. We might be like under the most lenient situation of the three of us, but we're still, you know, putting up really bad numbers and things are tightening up. So I'm sure we're going to have a lockdown for Christmas for a little while just to get back on top of things. And then it's no fun because even if you go outside, it's very cold. And unless you're really, really into being outside and doing winter sports, like cross-country skiing or something, there's not a lot to enjoy out there. And yeah, definitely you can't go too far and enjoy too much outside with that. But it's good because we have an awesome Bitcoin bull market to take up our attention, and I hope it lasts all winter, at least for us in Canada.
Yeah, talk about a suitable distraction from all this, right? Just like, you know what, everything's locked down, have to stay at home. Oh, Bitcoin's literally parabolic. That's cool. I guess I can get some times towards this.
I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of latent attention that's going to get paid to it as well, and I don't think it's anywhere close to here, despite what some people are saying. Like, oh, that's a top tweet. Oh, that's a top thing. Like, no. I think there's a lot of spare attention that's just waiting in the wings. I'm not sure what for. Definitely all-time high break is not going to be the big trigger of it. I don't even think, because I think people are still kind of on a hangover. I think you need to have some quote unquote early for 2020 people buying in at or after the all-time high and then getting hilariously rich and making a TikTok about it before you really get that sort of giant flood of retail attention.
That's a good point. Yeah. We had a lot of those signals, so-called signals on the way up, right? Like celebrities and TikToks and people coming back and making a resurgence. But it seems, thus far at least, we've been quite immune to the usual culprits.
I mean, if the bus thing couldn't dump Bitcoin, do you guys remember that?
What, the
video? Yeah, Bitbus, whatever. Jeez,
oh, goodness.
If that couldn't make it dump, I mean, what can?
I made a Telegram sticker pack of everyone's face from a still in that. And I didn't really put it into deployment, but I just kind of look at them in my emoji folder and think like, this covers everything in the most creepy way I can think of that's directly related to crypto. So
surprised it hasn't been NFT'd yet, to be honest.
Yeah, well, because I haven't done it yet. But when I need money, I'll NFT them.
Remember to trade your own NFT to create.
I definitely will.
Important.
I'll take a page out of BitBoy's book and out of Ivan on Tech's book and pump my own NFTs so that they sell out and I have to make 300 more that are over expensive.
Especially when the market's in a tough spot like this, just downtrend, chop, really difficult. That's you have to really deploy
you have to grind out you really have to make the call to action to your base and get them to pay for it.
Yeah. You know what? I've always been weary of people who try to personalize their audience base on Twitter too much and sort of create this collective consciousness, like, I'm with you, we're in this together, you and me, that type of collectivist approach. It's always been such a reliable red flag in the community, and they have like their own name for the people that follow them and all this kind of cultish crap. It's such a high strike rate for like just people acting in bad faith. The way I see it, and I'm privileged to have the audience that I do, but I'm like, hey, I'm like putting signposts along the way, right? Stuff that makes sense to me, even the educational stuff. This is like my understanding and how I use stuff. If it helps you, fantastic, along your road, like some side quest in a, MMO or whatever. If it doesn't, leave it. That's cool as well. But there are some people who really kind of try to build something a bit more personal about it, and as mean as that may sound, a lot of the time it's just kind of bad faith actors building this kind of cult following, and it's pretty creepy.
Yeah. I can think of a few exceptions to that rule, but like even then, at best, that kind of personal talking to your fan base is it just doesn't do it for me. Like I like Marty Bent, how he calls his followers freaks from Tales for the Crypt. Like it's probably the most benign use that I can think of from somebody who's generally on the up and up, but he would be the exception that proves the rule, because anybody else that it's just pandering to your base. And I'm sure, because we each of the three of us have a fair amount of Twitter attention, I'm sure we all have like times where we think, am I like just doing this to like pander to people, or am I actually like really giving people value or whatever? And then I try not to overthink the overthinking, but I know
like exactly if Donald just started going like, okay, my little ducklings, here's the TA for today, be sure to, I'd be like, what's going on here? I don't trust this guy anymore.
Hashtag throwing you another breadcrumb for all my little ducklings.
I guess that's something that some people have to learn the hard way. But yeah, I agree there are exceptions. But a lot of the time, even with the exceptions, you can tell they're taking the piss and they're very lighthearted about it. Have someone really trying. I mean, trading and investing, etc., just really isn't a team sport either. So if someone suddenly rolls up and is offering you all the solutions, that's kind of red flag in itself.
Yeah. Well, you can tell when like the classic like paid group people who I think it was Filicone that called all of his fans his baby whales. And that just in such an obnoxious way. And like you can tell that they're all aping into whichever of his bi-directional trades he didn't delete at the same time. And like there's really there's no alpha there, and it's weird to think that to think that somebody new is seeing that like, oh, everybody's on the same trade, like this can't be,
what could go wrong, right?
Yeah, what could go wrong? And also like, am I really like am I really learning? And that's always the default kind of excuse too, is like, well, at least I'm learning something from them. But like, yeah, education's education. There are a lot of places that you can find it that won't kind of like pander directly to you, or won't kind of wash your balls about it. Will like kind of, it's better to tell someone that they're on their own with the tools that they're learning. And it's good to point out as well, I think, that like, you don't have to put yourself on a pedestal if you're the one teaching the tools necessarily, which you guys do a great job of. Like when you said you just kind of put up signposts and point at them, versus other people that say like, yeah, listen, I'll take you to the top. I'll take you to a 1000x of your account. I will, if you follow me, I'll make you a millionaire.
My
like
students
that kind of
were
thing.
Altogether Timothy Sykes kind of scammy stuff, it's really strange.
Yeah.
I'm always
But so many people respond to that,
dude, who are like, oh, what kind of grown man would be comfortable being called a baby whale, for example? I just can't get that out of my head. It's like, yeah, I'm really feeling a part of this. This is normal. It's like, really?
I don't know. Maybe it's they think they can grow into a big whale or something. If they make enough money, I don't know the appeal, but there must not be any. I think I also mentally mistake people just generally out there on Twitter and whatever for being, older than they probably actually are, and more sober than they actually are too. I always think, anybody who might be out there in discourse is, an adult like me, and on Twitter only, when they're not kind of mentally adjusted, shall we say. But then I have to sometimes stop and remind myself, like, okay, wait a sec, what's wrong with this person? Like, what are they doing? Are they 12 and drunk? Because sometimes they could be, right?
It's like a coin toss.
Yeah, you can't give people too much benefit of the doubt, I guess, when something's going really weird or wrong, or they're kind of trying to or just in general, like that, the people that are okay with being called baby whales are the people who are like, that's just something that, oh, I'm in this club, I'm in this group, that's fine. Like,
sense of belonging and all that, maybe.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's the biggest point for most people. Like,
and that's why
if
the
you get
ducklings are so successful. Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, but if you get into a new space, right? I totally get it. Like, you're completely confused. You don't really understand what's going on, and then having something that you kind of feel like you belong to, that makes a lot of sense to have some appeal. But yeah, I agree with the notion that the faster you get rid of that, the better it's going to be for you. Because if you're stuck, like, having someone else hold your hand while trying to trade, that's never going to work. And I think it's the same with like investing. It's the same with everything really that concerns money, because you're on your own in the end.
Yeah. How have you guys managed that? Because I know you guys have congratulations on your really good, solid following of people who are like-minded, and they don't expect anything outside of what you guys deliver them, and you guys the expectations are well understood all around. It's just kind of a shared educational path. How do you guys find your crowd of people, so to speak?
Gosh, I think you kind of get back what you put out into the universe, sort of thing, with content at least. So if it's very clear that there's going to be no spoon feeding and that manner of content is just not interesting, then it tends to repel the people who want that and attract the people who realize or recognize the value in not doing that. I just think people's audience is seldom an accident, and you can really curate the type of people who you get to engage with or follow you, whatever, on a daily basis via your content, right? They're inextricably linked for me. So I guess I just kind of got lucky in some regard, just posting educational stuff that made sense to me, more light-hearted stuff as well. Like, I'm not a brand or whatever. Like, I will just comment the most asinine nonsense under all of my friends' tweets and just go on like a reply guy drive-by, if you will. And I've got no issues with that. So I guess that's my answer. I don't know if
you've turned it into a pinnacle skill, I think. It's rare that the cred reply guy doesn't result in a ratio, and that's got to be fun.
It's only to my friends. They know I love them.
Yeah.
For me, it's kind of like, it's been a little bit difficult to kind of make that happen, because, like, for example, with like the profile picture thing, that kind of always goes in that direction where people just kind of take it as spoon feeding, and that gets exhausting really fast.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's something that I'm still struggling with. like trying to kind of distance myself from it entirely, because like I said, it takes up energy that you don't really need to spend, I think. But yeah, it's just, I agree largely with what Threat said. Like, if you're a nice person in general, or like try to be, you get nice stuff back. And if you're just being an asshole the entire time, you're obviously going to get the same back. So it all depends on kind of how you treat the people around you and the world around you in general.
Yeah, definitely agree. I definitely agree. And you guys both put out like a little bit of snark out there, but that's part of just the discourse of Twitter. I find it's got a little more as expected.
It's just built up over the years as well, right?
Yeah,
It's got this cumulative effect.
Yeah, there's there's some build up that has to be released through the snark valve in order to stay sane in real life, kind of thing.
You mentioned like our audience and stuff, and as you can imagine, at least on this channel, a lot of them, well, I imagine the majority are traders or investors of some sort. And as a result, a lot of the time the guests we have are from a similar ilk, you know, shorter time frame, you know, traders, investors, more on the trading side. And we kind of talk shop about the same old stuff. Your background's obviously a bit different and more established over the years. There's more to it than, you know, Bitcoin's going up, I started longing and all of that. And I actually think your background is one of the more interesting things and one of the more unique ones out of the guests we've had. Without turning into a cringe podcast default answer, how'd you get into crypto? Do you want to kind of distinguish, or, you know, what makes you kind of stand out, or who are you, or how do you kind of define yourself? Yeah, that's that.
Well, yeah. Maybe I can do it through the lens of what you guys mostly talk about, because I have a similar background to you. I started off, you know, before crypto was a thing, I started off as a trader at a prop desk. And this is a while back. This is like in the early 2000s, where I would do probably the shortest term trading, like just scalping on the New York Stock Exchange. And it was really easy because every stock there was no electronic, well, very little electronic stuff. It was all processed by one person called a specialist who would manually match up orders in the book. And you could basically scalp very easily by placing bids and offers a few cents away from each other and just getting swept up when he blocked out the orders. So it was a lot of very, very simple, easy money to be made. And that was just one of many methodologies that you could use. So when I was kind of young and dumb, I learned how to I was basically just trading, but in compared to now, in what would be easy mode. You know, I'd be looking at 1 minute charts all the time and looking at support and resistance, but your fills would always be like, you know, nearly always be very well in the money if you weren't being too aggressive. And there would be fairly low risk to what you were doing. You know, it would be so I did a lot of tape reading, which obviously in crypto you can do some of, but I don't know how really useful it is, other than kind of watching what a whale, any given whale, is doing right in a particular moment. But from that, like, that skill set always sort of stayed in the back of my head. I did trading on my own for a while, had 4 really good years, and then one really bad year where I kind of blew out an account, and my long-term trading account, which was money loaned to me by a family member. So that made me sort of a black sheep for a while in the family. I was working, just running my own business to get out of the hole. And then while I was in hustle mode, just generally, I discovered crypto, and the lowest risk entry that I could get into it was via mining, by just, you know, buying the cheapest computer components that I could and using kind of set price electricity from an area that I already had to accumulate that way. And then I just got really, really interested in it. Speculative mining was just something that I wanted to do to sort of, because I was late to do it with Bitcoin, I wanted to mine other stuff and then trade it for Bitcoin. And so I had the trader skill set that could let me kind of manage risk or manage trade. So if I managed to mine something that was really running in a positive way, I would be able to hang on to it and then use, you know, just my own personal, most basic TA, basically 1 minute chart TA extrapolated to larger time frames, to know like, all right, I'll take some off here, I'll get out here, oh, maybe I'll rebuy down here if it's going really badly, that type of thing. So that's basically all I did, is mine stuff, trade in and out of it, and try to increase my stack and my savings. And I guess just using Twitter as a mining trade journal was what kind of brought me into the community, and made me fortunate enough to become a part of it for this long, which I'm super uber grateful for, because it's changed so much over the years. And I've sort of tried to, alongside all of that, establish a philosophy of looking at things, just as objectively as I can, without going down any mental modes that close you off from seeing what crypto is becoming with the most clear bird's eye view that I can. And I think that helps me in a way to not get too blindsided from what I may or may not be holding and having risk exposure to. Whereas also, I can just be almost like a mental chronicler for my own purposes of the community and what's going on in it, and the markets at large, and who's entering them and who's there. So it's kind of like I want to eventually see myself as like the wizened old hermit on the mountain who just has seen all of crypto and been exposed directly to all these terrible shit coins.
I mean, that's how you are in my mind already, if that's of any consolation.
Oh, thanks. That's great that I'm doing it right. I'm doing it right. But okay, that's a trading centric background to based on what you guys are doing, and that's why I appreciate the education that you guys give so much, because I can always look at like a Cred tweet or a Don tweet of charting and like whatever charts you guys decide to post, and your interpretation of what play you're going to make from them, or what play you did make from them, and it keeps my TA skills are really basic. There was no Ichimoku cloud use, very little back when I was trading day in and day out. It was just it could possibly, like, there's a lot of spoiling of soup by putting too many lines on a chart. So I would always just play around with moving averages, and the most esoteric I ever got was the John Bollinger's Gift of the Bands.
Oh yeah.
And basically a bit of RSI, but again, I was just using it all on like 1 minute charts, and watching futures markets as a leading indicator for whatever stock I was trading. So it really was extremely basic compared to what you guys do. And so I consider you guys a touchstone to like, oh yeah, maybe I'll go review like a Cred and Don video if I want to kind of reestablish whether I did actually know any of that, or what.
I guess
figure
I need
out
to
what I
shitpost
think I know.
less if that's how high the stakes are.
Oh no, please shitpost as much or more than you already do, because that part's fun too. I as a sort of side thing, like, I just don't want to ever lose the ability to shitpost and be funny all the time in this new level of finance. That's what I always wanted. Like, that's why I was so interested in Dogecoin, because it sort of threw the overly serious libertarian Bitcoin stuff on its face. Like, it's so much more fun to be your own bank and do all this crypto stuff without taking it too seriously or taking yourself too seriously. I think that's really, really, really important for if this is going to look different from traditional finance, which has totally made its way into crypto over the past 3 years. And I don't want to lose the crypto culture of not taking it too seriously to the people that sort of take it too seriously, or more seriously, and buttoned up, if you know what I mean.
Oh, sure. No, I mean, people talk about mainstream adoption all the time, and I think this run-up has had the most kind of evidence or explicit arguments you could make for steps towards that, with PayPal, just institutions more generally, etc. But for me, I know that mainstream adoption is a real thing when, like, Gainsey gets cancelled by Vox or something, once we get into that arena of everyone who's ever posted a green frog, just, straight up cancelled, New York Times hit piece, that sort of thing, that's my own personal indicator, I think.
Do you envision like a crypto gate, like a gamer gate, but for crypto?
Yeah, all these like Discord messages unearthed, and God, I don't know. I think
Yeah.
there's some immunity to it, given community. You know, this community didn't come from being taken seriously in the first place, right? Quite the opposite. Even within FinTwit, which itself is a joke to many people, we were considered the malformed toe, or whatever it may be. So I think we've got some ways to go. With regard to that, but that does raise the question. I mean, you've seen a lot of these cycles: long-term, short-term, bullish, bearish, etc. And prices aside, certainly with the narratives and what's leading price and all the spot buying and all the additional news coming out, I suppose and you can use this in any way you like. But is this time different with Bitcoin?
God, I want to say like, yes, it's different because I always want it to be different.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's so clear that like things play out in a cycle that rhymes with the last one, and they have some kind of underpinning to Bitcoin's halving events. All I can say is like I never expected the explosion that we had in 2017. So if 2021 is going to be another kind of explosion in ways I could never imagine, that's the most different that it can be this time, I think. Mm-hmm. I'd be surprised if we don't have some kind of explosion. Will it be like reflected in the value of everything going up? Possibly, probably not. Probably differently and like kind of more focused, but there'll still be people getting hilariously rich who do not deserve it and have no business getting hilariously rich. I think that's part of the whole permissionless undertone or undercurrent of crypto that is really important. Like people should be able to have the opportunity to get hilariously rich without deserving to. That's kind of
no, I agree.
I mean, that's the story of crypto, right? I mean,
yeah,
I would put myself in that category as well. Like, I mean, when I made like the most multipliers, I had no fucking idea what I was doing. So it's like most people, like it depends obviously on when you start, right? I mean, I got lucky because I started pretty much at the bottom of the biggest bull run. So I mean, I couldn't really do too much wrong.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, in crypto, if timing is everything, right? And if you time it right, or if you just luck out and time it right, like I did, yeah, I mean, you can make stupid amounts of money without really deserving it. And then afterwards, it's all about keeping it, right?
And realizing it in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Like up in USD, holding altcoins which didn't have a USD pair type of thing. I mean, gosh, how much of that did we see?
Yeah, plenty. A lot of it. And, I with stuff like that, I had to change my own mind as well, because now so much is denominated in USD. It's kind of like it's definitely a cap or a limiting factor that I had to make a mental adjustment, like from my original kind of premise of getting involved. I was only going to stack value denominated in Bitcoin because that was what I wanted to underpin. But the whole there's so many stable coins right now to sort of grease the onboarding of all this other money and just kind of like have a very easy liquid trade in and trade out base that's still crypto and legally not US dollars by whatever account. I've had to sort of rethink that and think, okay, well, maybe I have to compound profitable USD based trades and then roll undeployed funds into actual Bitcoin or other things that I think will hold their Bitcoin value or go up. So that was an adjustment that I had to make, change with the times, so to speak.
Yeah, Donald knows I love this topic because I just find it so interesting, and I don't think it's been like fully explored. I think we took a lot of it for granted. But like, it's
let's
something we
dig in a
wrote
bit.
about in Technical Roundup most recently as well. Kind of the dollarization of crypto to some extent.
Yeah.
And we talked about a lot about altcoins. I know Don's got a ton of altcoin questions. She's much better equipped to ask than I am. But mine is always, back in the day, and I mean, I say that and I mean 2017, which for you isn't back in the day at all. It's kind of mid in the day, I suppose. But nonetheless,
still back. It's still back.
Still back, yeah. Nonetheless, it was, altcoin. The prevailing narrative with virtually no counter argument was that, you trade altcoin Bitcoin pairs because that's how you trade altcoins in spot, right? And the pretty much and I know you've always been on the, you've had diversions from that and exceptions, but like, again, the crowd wisdom, if you will, was the alt BTC pairs, that kind of spot trading, and it's, that's how you trade altcoins, and its sole purpose of those altcoin to Bitcoin trades was to accumulate more Bitcoin, or at the very least, its primary purpose was to accumulate more Bitcoin, and that's done. Whereas now, with the kind of dollarization, you don't even need to touch a spot altcoin if you can just trade futures of pretty much any instrument, basket, or whatever you want. So do you have any broad sweeping thoughts or positives, negatives? How do you view this kind of shift, whereas alt BTC pairs are irrelevant at best to many people, even though we argue against that? But the volume's dried up and it's just not where all the listings, hype, and trading is at. Can you comment on any of that?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's definitely been a consolidation, especially among traders who want just liquidity and reliability and optionality with their trading. So from your standpoint, definitely that's where people are going to go. Like if it doesn't matter what pair you're trading against, we always until there's like a societal reason to use Bitcoin as a universal base and there's a financial loop that's closed and you don't have to think in dollars anymore, you will be thinking in dollars. And so that those types of pairs, like, it's perfectly valid to chase profitability in that. And with the sort of multi-year bear market consolidation that we've been seeing since 2017, those are the markets that have ended up with the most liquidity, and it's left a lot of these like legacy altcoins high and dry with their BTC pairs, because those just aren't, people have been holding their Bitcoins. They're not as interested in a trade on those markets, and those markets, the volume dries up except for arbitrage across the USD markets. And then there's the whole futures and tradable instrument where you never have to be in a spot altcoin or anything like that. There's no value accrued to you as a trader for holding a spot altcoin in a wallet with a secure key that only that's not the use that you're interested in right now. But I guess, like, if you do really get into branching out like that, and I'm not saying every trader will or should, there's a whole lot that can be done where, like, a platform may not necessarily stake for you, or if you're trading an ETF, you can't necessarily earn a stake on that, although maybe you will be able to. Maybe everything will be DeFi'd up, and you'll no matter what capital you have, where it is, it's always kind of earning some kind of yield with some kind of tie-in with something else. I suppose that all of this, if it's not going to die, it's going to be integrated with these long-term futures markets, and there will be somebody out there willing to underwrite a non-spot instrument or a derivative for anything that might not already have it, depending on demand. If sort of the DeFi space that I've been playing around with for the past little while kind of continues to grow and move towards a logical, not conclusion, but full saturation. It's still, crypto was very fragmented. Like, individual blockchains were quite fragmented, and the only thing really tying them together, because we were seeing speculation and tradability as the primary use case before anything else got built out. So it kind of definitely cart before the horse type of thing. Centralized exchanges were what was, kind of unifying everything and allowing liquidity to move across wherever it might, wherever interest lay. And now, because the trade volume in general has just grown so much, It's easier for entities to provide tradable instruments that are kind of a product for traders rather than, playing into like the speculative use case as though it were the only one. But of course, like this is what's promised by all sorts of cryptocurrencies, not just Bitcoin and Ethereum, is some kind of use case predicating value that you can speculate on in the first place. And I think that takes a lot longer to develop than the actual building out a trading environment, because a trading environment is something that you can almost directly take from existing marketplaces that have been going on for decades, if not longer, and deploy it in the crypto space. And here you go, like here's what all these cryptocurrencies are for. And it's easy to build that out and then say, oh well, this is all these underlyings are trash because they have no actual use case other than this trade. But it's just easy to copy and paste from legacy markets. It's much harder to develop the use cases built on all these freely creatable blockchains. And so I think it's very easy to get into a headspace where like, oh, all this stuff is trash, it's garbage, it has no other underlying use other than speculation. Well, if you focus on building the speculation part of it because it's easiest, of course that's going to come first. And then there's a lot less kind of brain cycles or developer cycles or whatever it ends up being to build out the actual end game of the experiment or attract, users or anything. So I think the way it's going in the long term is that traders, you guys and everybody that you educate are driving the attention and the volume and the financial acumen to be able to understand and integrate with anything that gets built out later. And we're just going to see like, can a specific tradable project hang on and survive long enough to actually develop something that gets used for something other than speculation?
Is that DeFi for you? Do you see signs of life/light in kind of the direction that DeFi is going? I mean, an argument for this Bitcoin run or rally cycle itself was that due to all the yield farming protocols and, having your crypto work for you, whatever that means, and being your own bank via DeFi and interest rates and all that, that there was a kind of chronic or significant underexposure to Bitcoin for, to a very significant degree, such that when it did start rallying due to this underexposure, it was always going to be quite exacerbated. But as for more fundamental use cases, stuff that actually works as opposed to building stuff for the facilitation of speculation, you mentioned just a bit earlier that you played around with DeFi a bit. Do you see that as promising? Have you had to abandon any of your old holdings from way back when in favor of those? Or what's kind of DeFi to you as someone who's been in the altcoin space for as long as you have?
Well, what really engaged me was the opportunity to be at the bleeding edge of something that could turn out to be a big thing. And so it was when tokens or coins were distributed by miners, because that was the easiest thing to do, was fork the way Bitcoin worked and then get those tokens out, whatever they promised to do. That was what I like to do. And so when that sort of dried up with the proliferation of ICOs, where instead you could just create a token and sell it to people and then get funding to do stuff with it rather than build a sort of network of miners supporting it, then I kind of got squeezed out or aged out of the way things had been done. And then DeFi is sort of a much quicker way to deploy that. It's all due to like marketplaces like Uniswap that have automated market making and just instant tradable liquidity is really important for new tokens and coins for the initial speculators that bootstrap it towards like validity and a use case. And that's what all DeFi is allowing for instant volume and liquidity for trade, and then also composability for yield and all that stuff. So what attracted me was just like, oh, good, I can be a degenerate getting into things at the cutting edge, at the bleeding edge of being early again. And that was the skill set that I developed with mining. And so I sort of saw a similarity to it where I could deploy those skills in DeFi. And, it's very different. I'd ape into something and instantly realize that I had lost my money, 5 seconds later, because there's a lot of DeFi things that look good, and then you realize it's something called a black hole, where it's a token, and the nature of the token is that you can buy it, but you can't ever sell it. And
it's a
sometimes
hodler's dream, right?
Yeah, it really is. If you were the one initially creating and selling the token, it definitely is. But and I would, if I could read Solidity, I would be able to find that. Also, although possibly not, because stuff like that can be hidden in the code. But a chart would even look too young, like, oh, there's just two 1 minute candles on this, and they're both green. I'm going to buy in. I'm going to ape in.
Strong trend.
And then it's a very strong trend, and it only gets stronger. It just the volume drops off as more and more people realize they're not getting their money back. But to get back to what you asked, like, I think that's where the most kind of hot-headed, degenerate experimentation is, and the potential for really ridiculous gains. I came to DeFi a little too late to enjoy the stuff like YFI that started out being distributed for like $35 each, and then 2 months later it was more than 1,000 times that. That's the type of thing like, that was the spec miner's dream, and now it was possible in DeFi. So I think there's potential for more of that, but it's first of all, most of the profits in that are USD based, so you're never going to be able to stack ridiculous amounts of Bitcoin that would make a Bitcoin maximalist's teeth gnash with jealousy with that. There is potential, because all of that stuff is so already interconnected with itself, and there's already trade volume with it. If like there's still plenty of experimentation to be had, and I think there'll be sort of new life given to a bunch of older cryptocurrencies that maybe want volume to attract, to get enough attention that they can build towards use cases that they've been working on and for years and years, that sort of the initial speculators, when you guys came into the game, were trading them based on. I think they'll finally get a new lease on life when you can wrap up Stratus or Syscoin or something and trade it in DeFi, or earn some yield on it. Like, I think that'll bring sort of more unity to the crypto marketplaces, and all these sort of stranded blockchains that don't have the attention or the volume that they used to, because there's so many tradable products, and there's so many like yield-based products just centralized on Ethereum there. But do you guys look at that very much at all, or just kind of stick to the trading side of it?
Don, go ahead.
I just look at the trading side of it mostly. But I'm not really good like with the new stuff. Like, if it just came out and I have no idea what's going on, like, I don't understand the code. I don't understand how it all works. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily my kind of expertise. I like the stuff that is a little bit older, where I can kind of judge, is this gonna scam me the moment I enter, or is it not?
Yeah, if you're just trading charts, you want to mitigate that risk of like that fundamental risk of like, oh, this dev is it has docs that say that he was a crackhead 2 years ago.
Well, he's alive. It's bearish.
Yeah.
And I mean, the thing is with all of this kind of stuff is, I usually just ask friends that are better in it. Like, that's the good part about having been in the space for a while, that you kind of figure out who knows, like, who has their niche, and then you just go to them and ask them, and they're usually very happy to help out. So that's kind of what I'm doing with that regard.
Yeah, that's really good, actually. I definitely found that there's more going on than I can ever keep track of the way I used to, and experts in like narrower streams are emerging, and that stream is becoming a whole field of expertise that is just nothing to do with me, and that's great. But it also means that, exactly like you said, like, there are people that are only too happy to kind of clue you in and tell you what's going on with that type of thing. So it works really well. I'm glad that you're making use of that, because that mitigates all the fundamental risk of you potentially not necessarily understanding something, and then you can just go trade it normally, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
How much adjustment do you think you have to do, not so fast, in your specific case, if we keep trending towards, ETH 2.0, proof of stake, DeFi, ERC20s, and the kind of proof of work spec mining arguably at the expense, or at least in terms of short-term attention, value, volume, whatever, at the expense of perhaps what you're more used to. Have you noticed any either alpha, erosion, decay, or fewer opportunities or opportunities missed? Do you think you'll have to kind of readjust your playbook at all? I know you mentioned you have already, but thinking slightly longer term, if all these arguably Ethereum ecosystem-led changes are trend forming, what's the plan?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to definitely. The plan that I had been running was to sort of batten down the hatches on all my bags because I was actually scared to take a lot of profits in 2017. I wasn't confident in the tax treatment of profits in Canada, and I didn't want any kind of like extreme scrutiny. I didn't want to be made an example of. Not that I'm a superhero, but I didn't want to be the superhero in the lab for the rest of his life. And as far as like the tax treatment was concerned. So I decided like, all right, well, if any of this stuff is long-term viable, and if I have enough like lottery tickets or long-term value propositions or whatever, I'm just going to hold it through the cycle. Because if 2017 happened, then it can happen again. And hopefully I can do long-term regulatory and legacy financial system integration arbitrage, and do my profit taking at a time when it's less likely to make me a guinea pig. Mm-hmm. So the question I asked while I did that was, how bad can it be? And it basically turned out to be like nearly the worst case scenario that it could have possibly. I think at the lowest, my portfolio value was negative 98.5% from the all-time high, right, which is not capital preservation at all, right? Like it's definitely the opposite, So like you could argue that like, even though I thought I was fairly well prepared to deal with it, like it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be, and the worst that I thought might happen actually came to pass. So it was, that part of it was challenging, and I did a lot to sort of mitigate that while still holding on. And part of it was, stepping away and not paying attention to it a whole lot because this was all long-term exposure. And it very likely will turn out that for the most part, I was very stupid to have done that in hindsight, but it fit with my premise. And if, so my confidence in a lot of this long-term stuff that I was holding is much lower. Like I got involved on a management side of a lot of product projects that I had invested in, which you're almost not supposed to do. But I thought, well, if I can put in some personal skin in the game beyond investment, then I can perhaps make some of these projects valid going concern at the time when sort of the market turns up again, and they become going concerns and valid projects, and then I'll have managed my bag by managing the sort of team behind it or becoming the team behind it. And that mostly didn't work. Just the bear market was just too vicious, and it sucked too much life out of too many of the altcoins that I decided to sort of stick with and help out. So that was a mistake that sort of compounded. If you want to call my holding on for dear life, no matter what happens, a mistake, investing my time and additional capital into sort of like as an angel investor in those things would have been a compound mistake on top of that. But that's just the nature of the extreme risk profile that I have. Like angel investments don't work out usually. And I'm not connected. I'm not in the know. I'm an anon sitting at home in Canada. So I don't have access to the best people and the best deals and the people that can maybe grease wheels behind the scenes to make something successful or cut through red tape or whatever else might be standing in the way of a project becoming really, really good. So where we are now is I'm doing capital preservation kind of in a too little too late scenario, but I am releasing some lower confidence bags, and adding to higher confidence ones, even though it would have been way smarter to sell them years ago if I had been planning on doing that.
Sure.
But sort of taking time to recognize that the game and the investment sort of scenario has changed a lot from what I had envisioned. And no matter what, I still have more exposure to a lot of the high risk, high reward parts of crypto. And the bottom line is, for a lot of these altcoins that don't have a futures market, the asymmetric bet is that you can only go to zero, but if there's potential for far more than like 2x or 10x or anything like that, I basically have been locked and loaded in some cases for like 5 or 6 years on certain instruments that are progressing along their own Lindy effect. Are you guys familiar with that term of just the longer something's around, the longer you can expect it? Yeah. Okay. So any of my bags that didn't die are on that Lindy train, kind of riding in Bitcoin's little slipstream there, having it clear the path for them. And that's how I just kind of have to think of it as a long-term broad bag investor. I'm lucky that I only report to myself because I don't have to make annual reports to shareholders of a fund. The NSF fund is just me, and I've been disappointed enough with my performance over the past 3 years. But I could I get absolution? Possibly. Could I get lucky? Even more possibly. But as long as I'm still engaged with it, which I think I am, and I've got, people like you guys that have streamed yourselves towards like the TA sort of education. If I ever want to brush up on my skills there, I know who to come to. And there are other people who, have their ear to the ground for researching new DeFi projects like that. I know who to talk to when I'm interested in doing that. So everybody's sort of entered their own stream of expertise. And I'm really, really fortunate that I feel really well connected personally to most, if not all of them. And probably the people that I'm least connected to are the professionals from like traditional finance industries or journalism industries or whatever, who found their way into Bitcoin kind of in or around 2017. And now they're a part of this, and I think they're having the time of their lives. They're having the most fun right now in crypto because they gained kind of professional acumen in the space during a bear market, and then they probably got some direct exposure, and now they're getting rewarded handsomely for it. So all those people I feel like I have the least amount of connection to, which is still a lot because we still I guess shit post together on Twitter almost every day, and they've seen my avatar and I've seen theirs, and if there's ever a question I want to ask, I'm sure I could probably open up to it. So I think holistically I feel well positioned to enjoy what's coming next. I hope it's good for everybody.
Don, what are your thoughts on, you're Don Alt after all, which I always find hilarious, and I do kind of take the piss. I don't know if you've noticed, right? but I do take the piss on Twitter.
I've noticed a bit.
With regard to, it's Don Alt, and it's like, these things are down 99%. You're like, I wait for capitulation, and then it goes another 99%. You're like, still more blood. And then, the thing disappears, and you get arrested for holding it, and you're like, one more spike down, I'll buy it, that type of thing. And we've heard a very different kind of investment thesis, both in terms of time horizon, also just viewing these altcoins. I know you had just discussing with you the show in advance about questions or whatever else to talk about with Not So Fast. Do you have any kind of views or reactions to or just compare and contrast sort of thing when it comes to altcoins, time horizons, investment theses, or anything really? Because I feel like I've hogged the bloody mic as usual, so I just feel really bad.
No, for me the altcoin thing is always like, I don't understand the code, right? Because I'm not from that kind of background. I don't understand most of the stuff that the tokens or the coins are trying to do. So I always come from like a place of skepticism, and that's done me really well. Where I'm like, okay, if the market isn't really, really in the upwards direction, I'm just not too interested. And I mean, I've been active in the altcoin space in 17. That was pretty much all I did in 17. Like I caught the Bitcoin run, but more importantly, like that's the thing with crypto, right? Bitcoin, like if you start out with not a lot of money, right? If you're not a sailor or like any kind of the big funds that just have a shitload of money, if you start out with little, I mean, Bitcoin can make you money, but the big money is usually, at least in the past, has been made with the altcoins, right? Like the life-changing stuff. And that has changed a little bit given the fact that we have all this leverage trading that we can use these days to kind of just make that not as necessary anymore. But yeah, I don't know. Like for me, it's always been, I'm just waiting for the opportunity to go heavy on the altcoins again. And so far I haven't seen it yet. But I mean, in USD terms, I mean, the altcoins are up quite a bit, or like at least some of them, for example, ETH. But it's just the Bitcoin pairs where I'm like, okay, if I want to be exposed to the altcoins, they should at least outperform Bitcoin, right? That's been my philosophy. And they really haven't done that. So I'm just defensive still.
Yeah, and that's the right way to be. Altcoins haven't outperformed Bitcoin. Like I can't think of very many that have, especially like traditional ones. But I feel like we're gearing up to, if not a permanent attempt, at least like a solid attempt where certain altcoins will go for a run. And it's definitely not coming yet. I don't see it on the charts. I don't hear it in the narratives, but I'm starting to see it on the ground floor of other cryptocurrencies which haven't died and which are actually focusing on their fundamental term to be money in the same way that Bitcoin is money, and be a store of value the same way Bitcoin is a store of value, but have something else. So a lot of what people are talking about are Monero and stuff like Decred. So those two were always some of my like fundamental, like if I have profits, I'll roll them into these bags. I consider them as good a long-term as investment as Bitcoin, but possibly with some additional upside exposure. And I think just like the narrative with Bitcoin has to get challenged by some of these other competitors in order for it to, the most probable outcome is that Bitcoin rises to the challenge and beats those things. And the people building on Bitcoin end up building the things that give those other competitors a value proposition. It all ends up integrating them or proving that those aren't necessary or required. But there's also a lot of upside in competitors to Bitcoin, even if economically and fundamentally there is no competition. Narratives drive a lot of the marketplace. And I know this is like far, far, far away from technical analysis, but it's something that I've been paying a lot of attention to because it just seems culturally the way the world goes, where we present a narrative of ourselves on Instagram that is, probably a lot of lipstick on the truth, shall we say. There's so much fiat getting dumped into all of these systems. And fiat is really flighty and it sloshes around. It is by definition the most liquid thing. And it kind of goes wherever the attention and the narrative dictates. And so I have a feeling that a lot of this value can be deployed into alternatives to Bitcoin, partly because the price of the scarcity of Bitcoin and its effect on the price of Bitcoin means that no institution with $500 million to park in value wants to be buying Michael Saylor's 10x. Like they would rather make themselves look a little less stupid and buy some other kind of store of value cryptocurrency that has the potential of making themselves look good. And it only takes one to sort of drive a self-reinforcing narrative of price growth. Like say a company buys 90% Bitcoin and 10% something else, and then that 10% of something else ends up dwarfing the gains relative to Bitcoin, and then they look like geniuses, and then somebody else wants to latch onto that narrative who has extra money to park, and so that's just how I see it looking in the crypto space, and it could obviously be anywhere, but right now it seems like it's cool to park fiat in Bitcoin, to be a leader in the business world with acumen and profits to spare to park money there. And that will definitely increase the price of Bitcoin as long as these people are buying spot. But pretty soon that spot's going to run out, and it doesn't have the same oomph to say, oh, I parked in this, in these futures, and these Bitcoin futures traded at this exchange, or like the volume may not even be there, or the outsized bet, or the narrative clout that you could potentially make. You could buy something and pump it. Somebody might even say like, oh, well, we're this bank, and we're going to champion Ripple to become the actual integrated coin of banks, and we're going to take it all away. And there could be an opportunity for someone in there. But the bottom line is just we've never seen this amount of printed fiat, and the financial system is ready to handle as much of that as possible. Like we've seen weird price increases from locally. I've seen it in like the supply of like building materials doubling, and Pokemon cards like going to ridiculous prices. Like anything that has some kind of degree of scarcity plus a narrative behind it, or some kind of extra utility or whatever, is absorbing some of this janky, weird inflation, but we're trying to hide that it's actually inflation type thing. And I think crypto is it's a bottomless vat that can catch all of that and then some. So I think the value proposition for Bitcoin, but also everything else, just due to liquidity and the market structures that have been built so far, are ways that will gladly and easily accept that kind of investment.
I mean, I can't say I disagree. Like I totally agree with that, just based on, like, in general, the entire crypto market moves on narratives, right? I mean, this entire move up, I would say, is a narrative-based one. It's people trying to escape inflation, right? Whether it's gonna be there or whether we're already having it, doesn't really matter, right?
The bogeyman is enough. That's how Austrians have tried to remain relevant over the last 10 years, is by Peter Schiff telling you for the 50th podcast that it's all over and to buy gold, right? Sorry, Doug.
Yeah. And I think that's really true. So the further Bitcoin goes, I think the higher the altcoins can go as well. I don't think, like, the one thing that I don't think is going to happen is that any other altcoin is going to overtake Bitcoin. I just can't see it happen. Like, I'd be very, very surprised. But then again, like, I've been surprised by this price hike this year as well. So my surprise isn't okay, it's never going to happen. It's just I don't expect it to happen. But yeah, I think the higher Bitcoin goes, the more attractive the altcoins get, just based on the fact that the higher it goes, the more people are interested, and the more people are interested, the more appealing the altcoins are. Because I think, like, every person that is new in the space and that hears about altcoins is kind of like, you always get enchanted, right? Totally. I mean, that's at least how it worked to me, right? So I saw Bitcoin, I thought, oh, this is really cool. And I mean, I heard about Bitcoin like way back when it was like single digits. And then I liked the idea of it. And then I heard about altcoins, and for me, Dogecoin was like, I just loved the concept of it, just not taking it serious. Just being like this meme coin. And I always knew that these kind of memes, like in general, memes have a lot of power, even though like most people don't realize it. Like this is going to be really interesting in the future. And I think companies and in general, the entire world is starting to notice how powerful memes can be. And yeah, I saw that in Doge like years ago, where I was like, this is the most memey thing I've ever seen. And it has the same kind of appeal as Bitcoin has, where it's like, it's this weird tech money that barely anyone understands. And then that coupled with memes just attracted me. And I think that's going to happen again. When you get new people in the space, they don't really know what's going on, and they see that. I think that's just going to be an instant, okay, this makes sense to me, because that is something that you can connect to way easier, in my opinion, than with something like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is way harder to kind of get into because, like you said, people are taking it serious now. But it's not easy to kind of get your foot in the door by like talking with people that take it super, super serious. It's much easier to kind of connect with people that are just like, dude, we have this dog and we have like this moon meme. And I mean, that's just, you see it and you're instantly sold, I think. So
yeah, I totally agree with that. In fact, I think that that's Bitcoiners, like the hardcore Bitcoin only Bitcoiners, kind of owe a debt of gratitude to the memeability of other coins not taking themselves so seriously because they don't have the value or the serious Austrian economic value proposition that Bitcoin does. I mean, that's what kept me away from Bitcoin, is I was like, oh, if I get Bitcoin, I'm going to have to buy into all these like libertarian values. Like libertarians don't get too far in any political sphere that I've ever seen. So maybe this cryptocurrency won't get too far either. But then exactly like you, Don, I got into Dogecoin because I thought, well, at least, and I saw the memes about Dogecoin first. And I thought, what? There's a Doge Bitcoin now? Well, like this is much more interesting and fun to me.
Yeah.
And I would rather stake my, whatever little bits of risk I'm taking on getting involved with it this way. So I could have, I had a Bitcoin wallet on my computer in 2011 and I tried to let it mine, but it didn't get me any Bitcoin. So I thought I'd just leave it alone and, and not feel fortunate that I didn't have to tell anybody that I got any Bitcoin. And then 3 years later, I was mining Dogecoin. So I think that level of memery that's available to altcoins, at least because they're not as serious bets as Bitcoin. Any meme that makes fun of Bitcoin is funnier than the funniest Bitcoin meme, like pro Bitcoin meme. Like that's an unfortunate way things are. But I think it speaks to a sort of Bitcoin generalist viewpoint where all of this stuff is born and forked out of one single code base, like primary code base from 2009 anyway. So a lot of altcoins are just like uncapped Bitcoin in a similar way. So if those are bringing people in from memes and from, taking risks on a really stupid play or possibly even a scam, like basically the educators like yourselves are the ones making sure that those risks aren't too big and there's understanding that precedes them in every possible case. And you can't save everybody from themselves or from their own greed, but you can at least put the information out there. You can at least put up the signpost and point at them, like you said.
For sure.
And so those are like altcoins are onboarding, and Bitcoiners should be glad for the opportunity that somebody's paying attention to something that is very close to Bitcoin, but not quite the same. And, appreciate that they have a story to tell where like, oh, you got burned on altcoins. Sorry for your loss. You'll never get burned by Bitcoin. And that's a way to onboard. It's valid. I'm sure a lot of people will buy into it, and that's fine. Like I'm so happy to just get more attention on this because I feel like a system that owes allegiances to no one of money, like a system of money that owes allegiances to no one, like Bitcoin is going to do people less wrong than whatever financial system they might be a part of. Because unless they're already rich, which let's face it, they're probably not.
I think with the altcoins, it works both ways, right? There's a prevailing, the narratives exist on both angles. That you get into Bitcoin and then you realize that these things called altcoins exist, and then you ape into altcoins. Especially when you didn't have all these futures and you needed to trade, like basically have spot Bitcoin to even access the altcoin ecosystem. Like that,
right.
I sympathize with. But I think, as you mentioned, the inverse is totally true as well. Like when I first got into crypto, I literally thought the point of Bitcoin was to buy altcoins, and that's all I did. Whenever I bought Bitcoin, I just opened up Bittrex and started aping into whatever Moko posted 6 weeks prior. So yeah, I totally agree with regard to onboarding. They work together. There's a synchronicity there, which is really important. But the hilarious thing is that there's a real chance, in my opinion, that Bitcoin's like, oh, this hot new thing, crypto amongst all these fund managers, etc. But in a perhaps trivial amount of time, within the even traditional finance, as you alluded to, ecosystem, Bitcoin could reasonably soon enough, if things trend in this direction, become kind of the boomer investment, as you alluded to, right? Whereas, oh, well, yeah, I mean, Bitcoin, that's what, everyone aped into that in, 2020, 2021, and some people even before that. That doesn't have its same kind of narrative appeal or technological novelty or evidence of forward thinking on the behalf of these amazing money managers, right? So it could quite literally become, the whole digital gold thing, but maybe not in the way that everyone wants it to be. And it just becomes kind of the shiny brick, except it's just the crypto version and not the physical version.
Yeah, I think you've got there's really something to what you're saying there, and I've been thinking along the same lines for the past few months, especially with the emergence of Michael Saylor as like the new Satoshi, which I've tried to just poke a ton of fun at because he's like the second coming. He's like the prophet of Bitcoin. That a real human flesh version of Satoshi for everybody to fall at the feet at and prostrate themselves in front of, and I get needing an idol. I get needing a role model. Like all of that is a strong narrative in support of Bitcoin. And like you said, it's very likely driving a lot of the current rise is like the sort of personified institutional money coming in and buying your bags that you mined or bought for $200 a few years ago and paying you as it validates you.
We get to dump like on Wall Street, right?
Yeah, we're dumping on Wall Street. It feels good. A lot of the people involved in Bitcoin were involved in Occupy Wall Street, not like 12 or 13 years ago, and they're getting their just desserts. They feel justified and vindicated and entitled, and I kind of don't blame them. But like exactly like you said, like Michael Saylor has gray hair. He's still got a full head of it, but like he's not a young buck. And you guys are the youth leaders on charting Twitter, I would say. Like I'm probably like at least 10 years older than you guys. And I think your cohort and the people like 5 or even 10 years younger than you that have enough technological savvy to get a wallet on their phone, they might get a little bit of Bitcoin, but the law of large numbers just suggests that people would much rather having like they don't want a small portion of one Bitcoin, especially if it takes like a big amount of Satoshis to send or receive, and there's not a whole lot they can do with it. Like gold and bars of gold and investment aren't attractive to young people who want to just they don't have savings. They can't like to any meaningful degree like create savings for themselves. They want something
like
that's
Tesla, right?
Yeah, they're a little more like Tesla. But I can see the narrative of Bitcoin as boomer coin, being a counter narrative to not even necessarily pump something else, but just put other cryptocurrencies on equal validational footing via narrative. And the narrative comes from the youth, I probably couldn't make a meme that would go viral, but some teenager definitely could without thinking about it. Like the mindshare creation is not with me or people in my generation. The mindshare creation is with the people like half my age, and that is going to drive a lot of the attention to all of this stuff. That it could well be that the coin that flippins Bitcoin is a token on Ethereum or on some of these other networks that's just super cheap to trade, but it has all the memes, and Doge is considered a boomer meme at that point. And half of its value is making fun of Bitcoin and Bitcoiners. And there's some kind of thing in the smart contract that like buys a little bit of Bitcoin and burns it and sends people a notification that that some Bitcoin was burned.
Ever. I agree. In terms of narratives, I agree. Like altcoins, especially if we're talking about young people and the whole social media thing, you're not going to have, even college kids, whatever, aping into something which, and the prevailing narrative is like a store of value, hedge against inflation, and all that type of stuff. I just, I don't see that being as the most compelling of outcomes. I think, again, in that point, altcoins have more potential. We saw a bit of that with like the TikTok Dogecoin thing, not to any large extent, but there are certainly sparks and enough going on. And again, we're talking pretty, slightly longer time horizons, but I think there's certainly a place for Bitcoin becoming boomer coin, and I don't think a lot of people would have anything wrong with that, or any objections to that, because if anything, it reinforces a lot of their existing notions of stability, hard to change, and immutability, and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, I would be fine with that too. I think the only people that wouldn't would be the people that really want, like, they see big fiat value dollar signs in their eyes for their bag of Bitcoin. Whereas, and they might see like, oh, Michael Saylor might be happy with adding 50% to his massive investment and just having it be stable and grow against fiat as an anchor for actually preserving his value. Whereas a lot of these people don't have Michael Saylor levels of value or profit to store. They just want to ride on those coattails, and they'll vehemently defend any narrative that allows them the opportunity to do that. But it's just it's narrative versus narrative, and I think the people that were interested in Bitcoin and have the sort of narrative backing for Bitcoin to go up, whether it's economics that they shoehorn in there, or technology and immutability and ossification of a protocol that stands on its own, like, that's all very well and good, but it's just so boring. Just like gold is so boring. And
unless you listen to the Peter Schiff podcast, right? In which case, the same old information in so many different forms. I mean, I repeat myself a lot, but God, can you imagine listening to like QE number 82? Just like, I wonder what he's going to say in this one.
Well, everybody, I feel like everybody sort of falls into their own repetitive modes. Like, I definitely see myself. I look at silly people that I've never liked in the Bitcoin space, like Tone Vase, who's like an analog to you guys. Like, he does the exact same thing that he's been doing since before I was ever in crypto, and it's not a joke. Like, he has an audience. He gives the audience what they want. They are customers of what he is selling and the information he is selling, and so he is fulfilling a need. Does it have a whole lot of relevance outside that audience? Possibly not. Does Peter Schiff's gold shilling, that's exactly the same as what he was doing in like 1978, have an audience? Like, of course it does. But it's the audience is aging out of what's hip and cool and lit, as the young folks
I find
might
the Saylor
say.
stuff so hilarious as well. On a slightly more serious note, it's because it's always the price created contrast between Bitcoin being somehow an antidote to all the legacy finance stuff, but when required for number go up, it becomes a necessary complement to the to the existing legacy infrastructure. Especially the point you made about cash sloshing around and somewhere to park it. It's like, oh great, this is just like another instrument. Oh, and it's got its own futures, and all the fund managers are aping in, and it's popular now. Legendary investors, great. How are we any different from anything in that regard? But more lightheartedly, the light of personality part, the cult of personality around Saylor part is always hilarious. I grew up in Moscow. My parents grew up in the Soviet Union and worked in the Soviet Union. And so whenever, when necessary, we throw around, permissionless, decentralized, and all that type of stuff. But when convenient, as you mentioned, we carve Satoshi out of the person who could be most accredited with number go up. And that's just funny, I guess. I don't have any super strong views or, militant about it. It's just it makes me chuckle.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't. I think it's actually like a detriment if you do buy into anything too much like that, because it is a little swept under the rug hypocrisy that people see. And it's funny to me now that, like, getting involved with Bitcoin, if someone said, like, when I was first starting, hey, it's Bitcoin's kind of cool, like, how do I get involved? Well, I would say, like, okay, well, this is how you have to use a software wallet, and if you want to get involved, the lowest risk way is to, like, get a GPU and point it at this multi-pool. It will mine some altcoins, but don't worry about it. It'll cash it out to Bitcoin, and you'll get small amounts of Bitcoin over time. Mm-hmm. And that's how you'll get it. And now you're not learning about a network that you're helping support. You're just buying in. You're just making a financial purchase. You can go on Coinbase. That's the easiest thing to use, but don't keep your money on Coinbase. They're evil. They're centralized. And you're like, what's centralized? Like, it's just like participation by consumption just seems to me like such a poor proxy to participation by, like, understanding the fundamentals of what you're doing. And like participation by mining or like running your own node, that's now seen as hardcore. I saw some American, like, blue check personality.
Say less.
Yeah, like she was talking about kind of Bitcoin to her crew, and she seemed like one of those I'm from the US Midwest in the Big Apple career women type gurus. And she had a long thread about Bitcoin, and a lot of the stuff in there was pretty good, like good stuff to tell her base. But she was saying something like, hardcore Bitcoiners will tell you have to get a hardware wallet. I keep all my Bitcoin in custodial services like Coinbase. Like just like these nerds will tell you have to do it this way, but I do it this way. And it's just like, is that really going to be exposure to like a high upside? But I guess if you don't understand the sort of fundamental different value proposition of Bitcoin that makes number go up in the first place, you're not really gonna, you just want the upside without understanding that like giving your stuff to a custodian is the way to make that upside not happen, because it's no different from any other investment.
Yeah, it's like a loss of identity, right? If buying in just becomes clicking another ticker on the same app where you do everything else, and that process simply becomes that, so reductionist and detached from first principles. I agree. I suppose it depends when you buy in. Like if you're buying in the bear market and like all the maniacs are dead, and it's just the case of like the only people sticking around, are there for a reason. I think you're better equipped to receive training, if you will. Whereas if you just FOMO in when Coinbase is #1 app on the App Store, like it was in 2017, you probably can't even find the people willing to explain it to you, because everyone else around you is just buying the next big thing.
Yeah, and it sounds like we might be making an argument for it should be hard to use, but like there's some kind of like if it's that easy to use, like easy, people have to learn a lesson of easy come, easy go before they treat it like before they treat it with like a little bit of respect for your own money and your own value that deserves, like I want to make it easier to use, but I don't want to make it so easy to use that you don't care about it. You just feel entitled to 100x gains on what you bought, and that's maybe too big a battle for Bitcoin alone to fight. I don't know how we'll do that. That's a cultural thing, probably.
Oh yeah. Duck, you've been quiet. Oh, is he dead?
Oh,
well,
might have.
There we go. I bet his mic broke again. He's screaming into the void. One thing I want to ask
I see him on mute.
It should work now.
Oh,
right?
There you are. Yeah.
I wanted to say something. Sorry, man.
Please.
Hit us.
We've kind of seen that in the altcoin space a little bit with the staking on Binance and on other exchanges, right? Where it's like people have their money on there, or like with the voting too, people have their money on centralized exchanges. We've seen it a little bit with what was it called? The Steam, if you guys remember. I don't know.
Yeah, that was a crazy one.
I think that's the use case. Anyone who's into blockchain in any sense or wants to know how this whole thing works, I think you should read up on that. Just quick interjection.
Yeah. So what happened basically was people had their money or like their coins on Binance and Poloniex, right? And then you had this situation where the community didn't really agree with where the coin was going, right? Without going too in depth about it, you really should read up on it if you don't know about it.
It's linked in the chat.
And then what happened was that the exchanges kind of voted for their customers with the customers' funds, pretty much. And then the question becomes: is it really are we really moving in a decentralized system if all the coins are on the exchanges and the exchanges can kind of make up the rules? Because then the exchanges are really easy to kind of influence, right? For whoever you want to send there. If let's say the government wants to do something and you have everything on the exchange, then the kind of decentralized argument flies straight out the window, right? And I definitely see some kind of danger in there. Who knows where this is all gonna go, right? But when you have people that don't really understand what it's about, you kind of give that power to centralized parties, and then you quickly become get a problem, because the Steam holders really weren't happy with what was happening. But there's nothing you can do about
Yeah,
it.
their voice got
you don't
taken
have
away, right? Because
and if you don't have access to the coins that you own, I mean, you can't make yourself heard, right? Because
well, I guess a lot of people that use them primarily as instruments for speculation or trade. But those part of what is giving those a base value is that there's a vote attached to them too. If you've given up, well, in the case of what happened with Steem, it is that people wanting to use them for trading didn't retain the voting rights to whatever coins they held on an exchange. And even the people who were being, I guess, good fiduciaries of their own Steem and their own votes were outnumbered by the people that wanted to just store their coins on exchanges. And because the exchanges could, they sold or negotiated those votes away to Justin Sun, who kind of took over the Steem network centrally via coup.
It's an
using
insane
the votes
story, man.
It's such an insane story. Everything that I had always read about anti-proof of stake coins because of the ability to mount a Sybil attack, which is just to take over a whole bunch of votes. Or there's also a paper by Phil Diane about how decentralized systems with votes based on your holdings are only as secure as how cheaply and easily those votes can be sold. And we're seeing a ton of stuff in DeFi where this token has voting rights. Well, how easily can those voting right coupons be stripped off in a composable system that literally lets you write a smart contract to do that if you want? Like Sybil attacks like that happened on Steem are only going to become easier in DeFi. And would you, if you're just speculating and that your tokens that you're holding have like a voting right attached to them, wouldn't you just strip that off and sell it for a little bit of extra Ethereum if you don't care either way, like most people would? And so a lot of these supposedly decentralized voting systems are going to get broken the moment it's profitable to do so and buy out those votes. And people will vote in against their own interests without even realizing it, and against their own value proposition of what they might even be holding if they don't realize, if there's a few steps to realizing that they're actually voting against their own interests as holders of a particular asset. So that whole Steem thing, it definitely is going to repeat itself in the DeFi world to probably really, really great detriment. And it's probably not the last kind of occurrence that we've seen of that. So I don't know how we're going to negotiate that going forward, but it's definitely not the last time it's going to happen.
Definitely. It's just like I read up on it and I was like, the kind of balls to that Sun had to do that, like just straight up, is kind of insane. And that so many people thought they would just get away with it. And I mean, they kind of did in the end, right? In the end, kind of played out. I mean, I guess both sides lost, but still.
Both sides really lost. And some of the stuff Justin Sun tried to do was pretty dirty, like installing a bunch of actual Sybil nodes, like nodes that he controlled that he pretended he didn't, in the Steemit network. And a hard fork is, I guess, eventually what has to happen. People fork away, and then value's lost on both sides, like you said.
But yeah,
it's been interesting to observe in DeFi, right? We joke about rug pulls, but I think there is something a bit more significant to it. Kind of, you have the experimental tech angle and bad faith actors, and the contrast between kind of informed or pseudo or informed enough developers versus speculators who can't read a line of code just aping in. I really think we're not over and aren't going to be over that part of DeFi's developmental arc for some time. That you get these speculative projects, the speculative fervor drives. I mean, even some of the audited codes, right? Some of the protocols which were audited allegedly, which for retail participants, like the biggest green light you can get, right? If you don't understand it at all, and then you have an expert, whatever, agency or firm or a specialist, essentially, an authority, telling you that, hey, the code is our thing, and we're telling you it's fine, and then it still gets, what is a flash loan attack or whatever else it may be. I mean, becomes quite difficult to navigate an ecosystem like that. But I think there's lots to come.
Big time. I think part of the challenge is that for an auditor, your auditing firm will have a set list of criteria, and you can't account for every eventuality in a system that's supposed to be, by design, infinitely composable, which means you can make something interact with anything else in that ecosystem. An auditor can't account for every single eventuality. And I think that's what, the flash loan exploiters, I hesitate to call them attackers, but just like exploiters, are looking for. They're looking for, okay, what would an audit reasonably account for, and what can I get around? Like, can I understand the code well enough that I can find a way to extract some money from this in a way that an auditor didn't consider? And there's always going to be a way. And if there's not at the time of audit, there's going to be a new token that's created with some characteristics that are composable right into that audited contract that get around that can create a new avenue for exploit. Like there's a lot of risk in there. Yeah, it's almost impossible. But I think like that doesn't mean that you shouldn't play around with DeFi at all. You should just know that there's extreme fundamental risks, just like you should know that there are fundamental risks to leaving your Bitcoin on an exchange somewhere. They're just, those risks, we've grown to accept them more.
There are fundamental risks to all of what we're doing, right? I find it always kind of scary when I see people that are, if you're 20, if you're 30, maybe even if you're 40, and you're kind of aping everything you've got into a certain thing, right? I think that's one thing. But then I see like these older folk that can't really afford to do so, just kind of greed to make as much money as possible by risking too much. And that always scares me. I saw that in 17 a lot with the altcoins, where I had people, like parents, send me DMs being like, yeah, I've bet my child's college tuition on this and this coin. Do you think it's gonna come back?
Yeah, I haven't forgiven my dad since that point, but yeah, go on.
Oh my.
But like that was what I heard in 17 and 18. That's kind of what made me realize that we were in for a nasty, nasty bear market, because you don't get that and then don't wash them out, right? I just hope it doesn't happen again. Like I hope this time people actually at least think a little bit about not risking it all, because I think at some point, right, the upside is limited if you're risking it all, like putting all your chips on the table. Is kind of dangerous, and the risk is much, much higher than if you'd said, okay, I'm going really deep and I'm putting 50% in, and then if those 50% are gone, yeah, that sucks, but you're still going to have a lot of upside with 50%, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the risk of like completely blowing out is just not there. So yeah, just hope that doesn't happen again. But I know it will. Like if we get another old season, that's how we get another old season, old rally, whatever. Like just people going crazy like that again. And I think that's you get it in any kind of market. You got it with wheat stocks where people just went completely nuts. You're gonna get it with stocks, or we've already had it. Who knows where that in what part of a cycle that is. And it's the same with crypto, where you just get people that completely lose sight of risk management, or in general, just their sanity, right? They just see the gains, never see the losses, and then just go overboard.
Yeah, there's additional risk to lack of technical understanding in crypto, I think, too. Like it's only a matter of time before somebody signs in the remainder of their life's universal basic income in government token, like USD government token, to some kind of like token scam. There's going to be stuff like that people fall for. And all you can do is what you guys do, is teach like risk management, and people have decent enough risk management with their own like US dollars money or British pounds money or euros money, like people know how to manage their own money. It's just there's some kind of abstraction in crypto that makes them think like, oh, well, I use technology that I don't really understand. And so, maybe, I'll indulge my greed a little bit.
Yeah, that's what it is in my opinion. It's the prospect of such crazily asymmetric upside that the greed just takes over, and that becomes the leading factor. It's kind of like when we were discussing with Donald, certain really old levels of resistance, or just when the market comes into previous levels, but it looks really strong. It's like, yeah, these people sold here and it might be defended, etc. But at a certain point, and like, oh, you know, the other argument that people have been burned by Bitcoin on the way down, so they just want to break even or get out as it's going up. It's like, maybe on certain assets or at a certain point in the market cycle or whatever. But there's also a kind of driving greed factor where even if you got burned and you just held whatever you had from, 17 down to 3, when it's back up at 16 and you're watching it go literally parabolic, you're not exiting at break even, right? You're holding on and giving it another spin, kind of found the extra lottery ticket in the back of your car seat sort of thing.
Some people do, I'm sure. It's hard to like, though I love to try and imagine like the background between people's sort of sentiment or motivation, I get so wound up in sort of assigning a sort of monolithic sentiment to everyone.
For sure.
And I try to like do it on my own too, because I didn't suffer during the bear market. I did well before then, well enough before then that even I was prepared in a worst case scenario. Like I wasn't quite at McDonald's adjusting the little hat with my ripple tattoos showing, but I have been like selling small amounts of Bitcoin all the way up just for like the small sentiment boost of like, oh man, it feels good to like sell a small amount of Bitcoin and get this much fiat out based on going through what I went through. And I'm sure, some people will sell at all-time high and will smash into big resistance there just because people will finally be under, barely underwater at that point or slightly above break even after holding that long. But there's so much more of sentiment that we can look at, and sentiment's so individual. It's hard to sort of get any additional read beyond what you see on the charts, right?
Such a great coping mechanism though, right?
Yeah,
it's very
definitely
popular on Twitter to just kind of make up sentiment. Like, oh, crypto, you see this a lot, like, crypto Twitter shorted support. It's like, no one really shorted support. You're just like building this bogeyman straw character. I know you love those types of tweets as well, Doug, where people just build this so-called position that somehow all of crypto Twitter took, and they are obviously the all-seeing almighty that warned you that these imaginary people were offside, and they, of course, were on the right side. I agree. Sentiment really isn't easy to assume or characterize. I guess funding is a decent thing in normal market conditions for that, but even that goes out of whack. And again, we've got like a Western-centric kind of European, North American view on all this, and even compared to Asia, we don't really mean all too much. So lots of biases to deal with.
It's fun to get into, I gotta say. It's fun to get into. Sure. And anytime somebody does a sentiment tweet, I'm like, what's the meta sentiment here? What's your sentiment right now? Can you be put into a monolith right now with your tweet and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, you definitely can. So far, you've been very, very generous with your time. And I wanted to ask you if you've got any final, as we seem to be on the cusp of an all-time high. Watch this age terribly. I've got no idea where the market's going. Nonetheless, Bitcoin in historical terms is high or expensive, whatever terms you want to use. We've seen slightly higher prices than this, also much lower prices than this. Market cycles, altcoins, the whole thing. Any sagely advice to maybe some of our newer participants as to what to expect, what not to expect, or just kind of reasonable things you wish someone had told you on a Friday night podcast when the market looked like this?
I would say enjoy the euphoric feeling, but don't let it influence you to do anything crazy. Just keep risk management skills intact, and just don't do it. Don't let euphoria make you do anything stupid or make you change your risk management. Be dispassionate at least on how you spend or invest or trade or anything like that.
Very nice. And if you have to ask yourself whether it's stupid or not, it probably is. That's generally realistic. Duck, I mean, we'll hear from you on Wednesday, of course, and Tuesday via the newsletter. But any final wisdom?
I don't think so. No, it's been a blast. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thanks
coming.
for inviting me on this chat,
Thanks,
guys.
it's
It's been really
absolute
good.
pleasure, and I'm sure the chat as well has enjoyed your company, and we'd love to have you back on once Bitcoin gets flipped by Dogecoin or something very, and before that obviously as well. But talk about a catalyst to get Not So Fast back on the show, right? That would be quite something. If we're doing thank yous,
anytime.
of course, Bybit as well. Thank you for sponsoring Technical Roundup. I think it's a big day in terms of Bybit OI. A lot of interesting participation coming from Bybit on during this rally. I'll say less. And of course, a final thank you to our audience for hanging around, or if you're watching the replay, make sure you join us every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or even one of those would be great, at 7 p.m. UTC. We do chart stuff, market stuff, and we'd love to have you. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Audience, have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you on Monday.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.